Thank you for having me. Congrats on your new job.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. I hope to learn something from you.
All right, well, let's see what happens.
Well, I mean, first things first, you ask really direct, personal questions in your interviews, sometimes right at the outset. I guess my question is, how do you get away with it?
Well, you just do it, man. It's really not about interviewing for me. I have emotional needs that need to be met by celebrities. And I really think if you listen to about the first 200 of my podcasts, it's really me just having celebrities over to help me. And that's my style. Like right now, if I were interviewing you, there'd be part of me that would want to connect with you very badly. And then if I didn't, I'd get aggravated and I keep pressing, until something happened. Eventually, you'd get exhausted and be candid with me and leave feeling slightly, uncomfortable. That's, I think, a good interview is when the person leaves saying, like, was that good? And I say, well, I feel better.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, you're especially in terms of what you said, like there's things you want to learn. I think there's some, you're obviously joking a little bit. I think there's some truth to that.
Well, I think what happens is when you talk to people, especially people who live public lives, they have a public narrative. So getting around that can be kind of tricky. And for me, an interview is not about questions asked. It's about if I can get 5 minutes of something that feels like authenticity, if something just gives way and you don't realize you're in front of mics and you're just having a conversation and there's a real connection there, it can be very powerful. And sometimes that leads to stories about someone's life, but I don't plan much. And usually that's okay. I just want the conversation to evolve from wherever it starts. I don't want to be dismissive. Like if I have someone in there that, cured a disease or won an Oscar, you don't want them to leave going like, oh, I didn't talk about the cancer cure. You don't want to have...
One of your interviews that was certainly special was with Robin Williams. A lot of people listened to that episode right after he died last summer. You asked some really direct questions about his addictions.
Sure.
In that interview. Why do you think he opened up to you?
Well, I don't, we knew each other a little bit here and there, and the weird thing about Robin was that, he was actually a very shy guy. We weren't close friends or anything, but we had the comedian bond, and he was really a comedian at heart, and that's where he comes from. So, but the real trick to that thing is I went to his house, it was 11 in the morning, and sometimes I travel, I don't do it all in the garage, and I'm recording in the car about how nervous I am. And then I get to his house, and it's just him and I. There was an assistant there who just put us in a room. And I think it had to do with the time of day, with the fact that I was the only one there. I mean, a guy like him is very prone to performing, but it would be awkward if it was just me and him, and he was like, ooh, look at me, so. But it was just the two of us, so he had no real, if there was one other person there, I don't know what would have happened. Then it would have constituted an audience in his mind. But I think that he was just ready to talk, and and we shared some of the same darkness, and I've had addiction issues, and I understood a lot of the issues he had, and I think after he had that heart operation, he got a little more fragile, and he was just ready to have a regular conversation. It was pretty amazing. It was an amazing day, and he was an amazing guy, and I was just happy that I had that interview, given what happened and what he did, because I think it's hard for people who don't really know or understand a guy in depth, especially someone who's hilarious and this guy that you grew up with loving, that when somebody like that commits suicide, I think of people are sort of like, how could the funny guy do that? And when you listen to that interview, it's not that you understand why he did it, but you can certainly get a sense of the full depth of his character and that he did struggle with a great many things. And I was happy that I had that because he didn't do many interviews like that, and it was a sort of gift to me and to everybody who was able to listen to it.
You said a really beautiful thing at the start of that interview about how that particular interview taught you about listening and being there for someone.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember saying that.
Sounds like I said it.
Yeah. What did you learn? I was curious what you learned.
Well, I mean, you don't really seem like the guy that has to sort of like wedge in, you know, like you seem pretty attentive already. But like I was always, you know, for most of my life, you'd be talking and I'd be like, yeah, my turn now. But I think like everybody's sort of like that. You're like, now I'm gonna talk. So, and you know, it's smart to lay back, you know, but you're gonna have to get in here sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. So you get the hang of it, you know.
No, that's interesting because I was curious what you meant by that, and that's a really profound thing to say. That you know, you became a better listener through that experience.
Like for years I didn't really know what the word empathy meant, and you know, I thought it was like some version of, you know, of sympathy. I just never looked it up, and it was surprising because, you know, all those years I didn't know what it meant. I was incapable of experiencing it. So as I talk to people, because I'm self-involved, you know, I'm a self-centered person. You know, I got a lot of noise in my head, and you know, I'm very important in my head, and you know, everybody's just sort of like there to you know, help me out and relieve my stress. The idea of being there for somebody else, it's sort of like if I have to. Well, that person's having a problem, I should go over there. Oh no, that guy's got it. So
yeah.
But okay, I'm getting around to what you're asking.
No worries.
What happened was I became very bitter and cynical, and you know, and by the time I started the podcast, I was sort of I was very, you know, closed down and angry. And as a kid, you know, I was always the one that was very attracted to charismatic people who had stories, who were entertaining, and that really, you know, connected me to something. I had this innate urge to sort of get off on somebody else's, you know, excitement. And as I started interviewing people that were charismatic and creative, and it sort of opened me back up to that. And I found myself just my heart opening a little bit and engaging with other people's stories. Like if I'm sitting in the podcast in my garage listening to somebody, I'm pretty wide open. I'm very good at intimacy with strangers. I'm no good at maintaining it with people I know a long time. It's like I can have an amazing conversation with somebody I know is going to leave and I'm never going to talk to again.
Yeah.
So that's why this medium works for me. But it just started happening. I realized that if I just shut my mouth and I let silences be silence, if that's supposed to be there, if there's an emotional beat that needs to be taken, like I can just shut my mouth because there's an impulse. So, like if somebody's like crying in front of you during an interview, you want to go like, oh, let them cry. Because it's very compelling. I mean, it might feel weird as a person to just let someone cry before you, but as a listener, people will be like, I'm not getting out of my car, which is what you want.
Yeah.
So that was all supposed to be humorous, and apparently you people took it a little too seriously.
Well,
I'm not suggesting he just let someone cry here. I'm just suggesting that if they're okay and they're crying, to go ahead and let them cry, because that's compelling radio.
I want to get back to something you said, though.
I want to finish right
now.
now.
You go for it. Finish off. Yeah.
I want you to hold on to that question.
Okay.
I think you had the good idea there.
It's there.
You were like, Maron's floundering. I got to save him. No. I'm okay. But what happened was I started to feel people's stories. And I started to feel emotionally connected to them. I don't know why it happened. It just happened because I was ready to sort of, you know, let myself do that in my life in general. And when I'm sitting there and I hear someone, even if they're just talking about an audition or about, you know, something that's not even that emotional, I'll feel myself get choked up. And I'll just sit there with it because, you know, I don't want to start crying because Jenny Slate is talking about getting SNL. You know, it's inappropriate. Like if I'm sitting there like, oh, this is amazing, you got a show. So, but I feel it in my throat, and my brain's like, you know, if I'm feeling this, perhaps, you know, others will feel it as well. And I think that's, you know, why the show has like why people like it.
I love the transformation on a personal level that you're describing. And one interview I listened to with Louis C.K., he said something I thought was really profound and beautiful to you. He said, your whole journey has been bringing down your defenses. I thought it was so beautiful to hear from a peer and a friend that your journey hasn't been like writing better jokes or delivering better. It's been breaking down your defenses.
Right,
What'd you think
becoming
of that?
Better person.
Basically.
That's it.
And it's impacted your art.
Yeah, no, he's right. You know, Louis right. Boy, that guy had no idea what that interview was going to become. I swear to God, when I was like, because Louis and I have known each other for years, and he really is a good friend of mine. We don't talk a lot, but he's one of those people where when you don't see somebody for a year, but you can just walk right back in, and you somehow you help each other somehow just by being alive. But like when I think when I asked him to do that podcast, there must have been sort of some element of like, I got to help Mark out. He's got this project he's working on, and I don't think he had any idea that we'd be sort of married in the media for the rest of our lives. But yeah, he's a very astute and sensitive guy, and that was a very emotional conversation, and our friendship is better. Now we do sort of connect and talk to each other.
I want to ask you about being vulnerable in your interviews. You mentioned earlier you were candid about your struggles with addiction in the conversation with Robin Williams. What's the importance of that in your podcast, of you being vulnerable and honest?
Well, I mean, I think that's all of it, is that like if I can offer up some part of myself, shamelessly, and connect on that level, it kind of raises the stakes in a conversation, If I'm going to say like, oh yeah, I used to do a lot of coke, and somebody who's probably didn't anticipate, talking about that might go like, yeah, I did a little. I'm like, a little? And then maybe you get into that, and I'm not out to sandbag anybody or make controversy, but I think if you volunteer your humanity and your humility and you open your heart and share, it's just not normal for an interviewer to sort of share so much, which is why I don't really call myself an interviewer. I just like to have a conversation. There are times even now where I should just shut up. I mean, people are like, dude, why'd you keep finishing that person's sentences? And I was like, because I just didn't have the time to wait for them to finish. So, and if I was wrong, they would have told me, and then that would have been fine. But I guess it just worked out. But I think that by offering up my own, not secrets, but my own vulnerability, it brings people into a different place conversationally.
Do you think that's a problem with conversation in general? Most people aren't vulnerable enough? There's not enough real conversations, basically?
Yeah, of course not. I mean, I don't know. Like, people are like, wow, and people used to say, like, listening to your podcast, it's like therapy. It's like a therapy session. It's like, no. There was a time, before, hold on, let me check my phone. There was a time when people would be like, let's hang out. What are we going to do? I don't know. Let's just hang out and talk for a little while. Now people will be like, what is that? What do you mean? And maybe I'm generalizing, but in my life, especially coming up as a comic, we didn't have anything to do. We'd given our life to this ridiculous dream, and we were just a bunch of, gypsies wandering around with notebooks. So other comics, it'd be like, what are you doing today? And they're like, I don't know, I guess I'm going to eat. And then you're like, all right, well, let's hook up. We'll just hang out. And we just talk for hours. And it's a beautiful thing. Human beings are designed to handle and carry the burden of other human beings. And it's the part of the beautiful soul connection that we all have, is the ability to interact and fairly effortlessly make each other feel better. It's just we've all gotten so self-involved and busy with garbage that we can't even do the basic politeness and listen to somebody for 5 minutes. Sometimes all you need to do is listen to someone for 5 minutes, and you'll see them 10 years later, and they'd be like, you changed my life that day. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
You mean when I put my phone down? So you should be aware of that.
Well, getting acquainted with your work and that Louis C.K. quote, what he said to you, really struck me, and it made me think maybe your journey and a lot of our journeys isn't from insecurity to security. It's from insecurity to being open and honest about your insecurities in a way that allows other people to do the same. And I think that's what you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
This is Marc Maron. Thank you.
Good luck with your job.
Thank you.